My name is Linda Harrison, and I'm 29 years old. By the time my father decided to let my brother teach me a lesson by humiliating me in front of 50 people, I was already saving children's lives in Boston and quietly holding the kind of paperwork that could erase my family's illusion of power in under 15 minutes. The irony still makes me smile, just a little. The kind of smile that tastes like metal and old wounds. Mom's 51st birthday party glowed in warm golds and soft string lights. Neighbors and old family friends filled the backyard in Portland, Maine. From a distance, it almost looked like a scene from one of those sentimental commercials. Laughter, clinking glasses, a grill smoking near the deck, the bay catching the last blush of sunset. Up close, I could feel the fault lines. I'd driven up from Boston after a 19-hour shift in the pediatric oncology ward. I still smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. My boyfriend Ethan had texted right before I lost service on the highway. "You don't owe them anything, Lynn. Not after everything. Call me if it gets weird." I'd stared at his message at a rest stop, thumb hovering over the screen, before shoving my phone back into my bag and telling myself I could handle one evening with my family. I had handled far worse. Now, I sat at the long table. Mom had dressed in cream-colored linen, my hair twisted into a low bun to hide how tired I was. The clam chowder in front of me steamed gently. The bowl was familiar. Everything about this house was familiar. The drafty colonial siding, the warped floors that had tilted my childhood dresser, the screened porch that caught every Atlantic gust in winter and made the whole place whistle like it was haunted. Mom, Karen Harrison, fifth-grade teacher, chronic overfunctioner, stood at the head of the table, cheeks pink with wine and attention. Dad, Robert, marine engineer and professional avoider of emotional conversations, sat to her right, elbows propped, staring at his plate as if someone had nailed his gaze there. On Mom's other side, my younger sister Vanessa beamed like she was accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award instead of just eating soup in our backyard. 6 years younger than Austin, 12 years younger than me, the baby who'd never been told no in a language she understood. And then there was Austin. My brother stood up so fast his chair scraped against the deck with a scream. He grabbed the heavy ceramic bowl of chowder in front of him, knuckles whitening around the rim. Someone laughed, thinking he was about to propose a toast. He didn't. The chowder hit me like a freight train. Scalding clam broth exploded across my face, filling my nose, burning my eyes, sliding down my neck in thick, greasy rivers. Chunks of potato and clam clung to my hair, dripping onto the cream-colored tablecloth Mom had ironed that afternoon. The whole yard went silent, like someone had punched a mute button on the evening. Austin slammed the empty bowl down so hard the spoon jumped. He leaned across the table, eyes bright with something wild and ugly. "You've got 15 minutes to get out of this family," he snarled. For a second, I just sat there, chowder cooling against my skin, my brain stuttering between the reflexes I knew. Protect the airway, wash the burn, assess damage, and the reality that this wasn't a trauma bay. These were supposed to be my people. No one moved. Dad stared at his beer. Mom's hand fluttered uselessly in the air, hovering between me and Austin, but committed to neither. Vanessa's reaction was the most honest. She actually started clapping. A sharp, rapid little applause that sounded like hail on a tin roof. "Oh my God, Austin," she giggled, tilting her phone to get a better angle. "That was savage." There it was, my family in a single frame, my pain as their entertainment. My eyes stung. I reached blindly for my napkin, dabbed at my face, then felt for my leather bag on the empty chair beside me. My fingers brushed the worn strap, then the thick, familiar edge of the manila folder inside. For 3 months, it had never left my side. I'd reviewed its contents between surgeries, on red-eye flights, in the quiet corners of the hospital where no one would ask why a pediatric oncologist was reading trust documents instead of research articles. I pulled it out now and set it on the table. The thud it made seemed to land in everyone's chest at once. "Fine," I said, my voice colder than a New England winter, the kind that makes your breath crystallize midair. 15 minutes from now, everything you think you own disappears. Vanessa's clapping stopped. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's grip tightened around his beer bottle. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked as someone shifted uncomfortably, torn between staying for the drama and pretending they had somewhere else to be. I didn't open the folder yet. Not yet. Timing was a scalpel. You had to know exactly where to cut. Instead, as I looked around at the people who had just watched my brother assault me and done nothing, my mind did what it had trained itself to do during 12 years of medical training. It rewound. Because none of this started with a bowl of chowder or a birthday party. It started in that same house, in a smaller body, learning the shape of being invisible. Growing up in Portland, Maine, we lived in this drafty colonial on the edge of Casco Bay. The house had been settling since the 70s. The floors were warped just enough that marbles would roll toward the front door on their own. The screened porch caught every Atlantic gust, whining in January and rattling in March, like it disapproved of our life choices. Dad worked brutal hours as a marine engineer, coming home smelling of diesel and salt water. Mom graded spelling quizzes at the kitchen table, always smelling faintly of erasers and fruit snacks. I arrived first, the prototype child who came with no instructions and no fanfare. By the time I was old enough to ride the school bus alone, I already knew how to pack my own lunch, how to call Grandpa if Mom forgot pickup, how to read the mood in a room before I spoke. Then Austin arrived when I was 4, the middle child who somehow became the son we all orbited. From day one, he got the best of our modest means. New basketball shoes every season, private tutoring. Mom and Dad scraped together from overtime shifts. A used motorcycle for his 11th birthday that Dad spent 3 weekends fixing up in the driveway, grease up to his elbows, eyes bright with pride. Mom would practically glow when Austin brought home a C+. He just needs to find his passion, she'd say, smoothing his hair like he'd handed her a Nobel Prize. Dad high-fived him for every recreational league basket, even the air balls. "That's my boy," he'd shout from the bleachers. Then, 6 years after Austin, Vanessa arrived, the baby who turned favoritism from a habit into law. By the time she hit elementary school, the rules had been completely rewritten. Vanessa went to the prestigious charter academy across town, the one with iPads for every student and a French immersion program. Mom drove her there every morning, packing organic bento boxes like it was a competitive sport, while I rode the yellow bus with a turkey sandwich in a paper bag. When Vanessa had ballet recitals, the entire family sat in the front row, phones out, eyes shining. When I won my first robotics competition, Dad glanced up from the Patriots game long enough to say, "That's nice, honey," before turning the volume back up. Money for Austin's hobbies flowed like the ocean outside our windows. Drum lessons, lacrosse camps, a shiny silver Jeep Wrangler for his 17th birthday, Dad's bonus from a government contract parked in the driveway with a big red bow. Vanessa hit 19 and got a pearl white Volkswagen, keys handed over at her graduation party, complete with champagne and a cake shaped like the Eiffel Tower. I watched from the sidelines, doing the math in my head. Tuition, loan interest, the price of being the reliable one who didn't ask for help. There was exactly one person who seemed to notice the imbalance, Grandpa Walter Harrison. He lived 40 minutes north, in a modest Cape Cod cottage filled with old pharmaceutical journals and vintage medical equipment from his glory days. Where my parents saw me as a convenient success story, Grandpa saw me as something else entirely. Every month, no matter how brutal my high school schedule became, I'd go up to visit. Later, when Boston and med school swallowed my life, I still made it at least once a month. We'd sit on his weathered deck, overlooking a small marsh, drinking black coffee as he recounted stories from his early days in pharmaceutical distribution, how he'd built a small company supplying antibiotics and cardiac meds to rural Maine clinics before selling to a national chain for a solid profit. He'd quiz me on pharmacology and anatomy, long before I ever stepped into a medical school classroom, nodding with quiet approval at my answers. "You've got the calling, Lynn," he'd say, voice rough from years of pipe tobacco. "The others, they're just skating through." I always tried to laugh it off, brushing his words away like cigar smoke. But they stuck. The night of Mom's birthday party, with chowder crusting in my hair and 50 pairs of eyes on me, it hit me like a second impact. Grandpa hadn't just been reminiscing. He'd been taking notes, and he'd made decisions. The folder in front of me on the table suddenly felt heavier than the ceramic bowl Austin had thrown. And I knew, with a clarity I usually reserved for the moment before I made the first incision in an operating room, that this was the night everything finally shifted. Forever. If you'd asked my parents back then, they would have sworn they treated us all the same. They would have pointed to the roof over our heads, the food on the table, the fact that no one went to bed hungry. They would have called that love and considered the case closed. But favoritism isn't always screaming and slammed doors. Most of the time, it's in the quiet decisions. The checks you write, the ones you don't, who you show up for, who you forget. By middle school, the hierarchy in our house was an unspoken religion. Austin was the chosen son. Vanessa was the adored baby. I was the proof that they'd done something right, as long as I didn't ask for anything. When Vanessa turned 7, Mom started getting up an hour earlier every day to prepare her lunches. Perfect little bento boxes with cut fruit shaped like stars, tiny containers of hummus, organic crackers. It was impressive, honestly, a culinary art project. That same morning, I'd be at the counter making my own turkey sandwich, slapping mustard on bread while Mom shouted, "Hurry up, Linda, the bus won't wait." When I brought home exam papers with 100% at the top, Mom would smile distractedly and say, "Knew you could do it, honey." Then she'd ask if I could quiz Vanessa on her spelling words, because you're so good at this stuff. When Austin dragged a C+ in math across the finish line, Dad high-fived him like he'd just secured a government contract. Mom baked brownies. By high school, it wasn't subtle anymore. Austin's room looked like a sporting goods store, and Best Buy had a baby. New basketball shoes every season, tournament fees, drum lessons, lacrosse camps, a flat-screen TV that fell off a truck during Black Friday. When he turned 17 and Dad's offshore project bonus hit, a silver Jeep Wrangler appeared in our driveway, bow on top, like a car commercial had come to life. Vanessa's world was pastel and polished. She got into a prestigious charter academy across town, the kind of place with a French immersion program and iPads for every student. Mom drove her every morning, latte in one hand, healthy smoothie in the other, talking about college tours and study abroad programs like they were birthrights, not expenses. Her ballet recitals were full productions, first row seats reserved for the entire family, flowers, a fancy dinner afterward. "Because we're so proud of you, sweetheart." Videos posted online with captions about how our little star is shining so bright. When I won my first robotics competition, we stopped at the drive-thru on the way home, so Dad wouldn't miss kickoff. "That's nice, Lynn," he said, eyes on the game schedule printed in the newspaper. "You always figure this stuff out anyway." Always. I always figured it out. College only sharpened the contrast. Vanessa's savings fund grew fat with deposits labeled future tuition, Europe trip, emergency, all while she was still in high school. Mom sat at the kitchen table with brochures for elite universities, circling them in red pen. Austin lasted 2 semesters at community college before declaring that traditional education is a scam for sheep. Dad sighed once, then started funneling money into whatever his son's newest vision happened to be. I, on the other hand, spent nights hunched over our dial-up computer, hunting scholarship databases while the house slept, clicking through application after application, writing essays about perseverance and grit and why I wanted to go into medicine, printing drafts on the squeaky old printer, hoping the ink cartridge wouldn't die halfway through. The thing about being the responsible one is eventually everyone treats your effort like background noise. They only notice when you stop. I didn't stop. I graduated high school with honors, accepted to a solid pre-med program out of state. The night the acceptance letter came, Mom hugged me in the doorway, already calculating how far her teacher's salary would stretch. Dad said, "That's great, Linda," without looking away from the marine engineering schematics spread across the dining table. Austin came in half an hour later, tossed his car keys into the fruit bowl, saw the packet, and whistled. "Wow, big brain makes it out of Maine," he said. "Guess we'll see if all those nerd trophies actually matter." Vanessa only wanted to know if my dorm would have a good view for selfies. If there was a single person who looked at that letter and fully understood what it meant, it was Grandpa Walter. He called the second Mom posted a blurry photo of me holding the acceptance packet on Facebook. "Dr. Harrison," he said as soon as I answered, "has a nice ring, don't you think?" I laughed into the receiver, sitting on the back steps, knees pulled to my chest. "I'm not a doctor yet, Grandpa." He snorted. "Details. You will be. You keep showing up, the world eventually has to admit you belong." By the time med school rolled around, that phrase had become my silent mantra. Keep showing up. During brutal exam weeks, when my classmates melted down in the library at 2 a.m., Ethan would bring me coffee and quiz me on pharmacology. Back then, he was just another exhausted student with dark circles and bad jokes, not the man who would someday look me in the eye and ask if I was sure I wanted to go to my mother's birthday party. "You need a day off from them," he told me once, when I'd hung up after yet another guilt-laced phone call about why I never came home or why I didn't send money the way family helps family. I don't get days off, I'd said, half teasing, half bitter. Not from work, not from them. Ethan had leaned back in his chair, studying me with that steady, calm gaze that saw more than I wanted it to. Linda, there's a difference between caring for patients and letting your parents carve pieces out of you every time they feel like it. I'd changed the subject. It was easier than admitting he was right. If Ethan had ever met Grandpa, they would have liked each other. By the time I was deep into my residency, my visits to Grandpa's cottage were less frequent, but never non-existent. Once a month, no matter how tired I was, I'd either drive the 2 hours up Route 1 from Boston or catch a cheap flight, showing up on his weathered deck with a thermos of hospital coffee. We'd sit there, watching the marsh breathe in and out with the tide, black coffee cooling in chipped mugs. He'd tell me stories about early antibiotic distribution, about patients in rural Maine who used to drive hours for a single dose of life-saving medication, about the day he sold his company to a national chain and how he made sure his former employees were taken care of. You built something real, I told him once, tracing the rim of my mug. He shrugged. I built something necessary. There's a difference. He poked my shoulder with an arthritic finger. You're building both. He kept inviting the rest of the family, even as his health started to fray at the edges. Dad visited maybe once a year, always in a hurry, always checking his watch, muttering about project deadlines and tied schedules. Mom sent birthday cards, but rarely showed up in person, claiming parent-teacher conferences or school fundraisers. Austin ignored most invitations entirely, blowing off Sunday dinners for parties or networking events, texting vague excuses about being swamped, even when Grandpa called directly. Vanessa was somehow worse. She'd promised to visit after dance practice, then ghost him with stories about study groups or shopping trips to Freeport. Grandpa never complained out loud, but I saw the way disappointment settled in his eyes like fog on the bay when another call went unanswered. The extra place he'd set at the table, quietly removed when it became clear no one else was coming. One weekend when I was 26, he pulled me aside after lunch. We were clearing plates, the afternoon light filtering through the kitchen window, turning dust motes into tiny galaxies. Come here a minute, he said, his voice softer than usual. He led me into his small office, walls lined with framed degrees and faded photos, warehouse workers in the 60s, him standing in front of delivery trucks, newspaper clippings about the company he'd built. He opened a drawer and pulled out a faded black and white photograph of his first warehouse team. Handsome men in white coats, women in knee-length skirts, all squinting into the sun. Keep pushing, he whispered, his hand trembling slightly as he pressed the photo into my palm. Medicine. It needs people who care more about saving lives than Instagram likes. Grandpa, I started, throat tightening. He squeezed my fingers, surprisingly strong. Promise me something, Lynn. What? If the time ever comes, you remember who showed up. Not who talked the loudest, not who cried the hardest. Who, actually, showed up. I thought he was just being dramatic. An old man worrying about being forgotten. So I promised, half listening, already thinking about the next exam, the next rotation, the next patient. I didn't know then that he was writing that promise into something much harder to ignore than memory. Holidays made the divide in our family glow like a surgical incision under bright lights. Thanksgiving meant Austin carving the turkey like he was accepting a prestigious award, Vanessa snapping selfies with her homemade pie, angling the plate for the best lighting. Mom bustling, Dad bragging about offshore platforms and government contracts. Grandpa sat at the far end of the table, picking at his mashed potatoes, watching the chaos with tired eyes. When no one else was looking, he'd catch my gaze and mouth, "Thank you," for helping him up the stairs, for refilling his water, for noticing when he was too quiet. I'd nod back, our silent understanding stretching between us like a bridge only we knew how to cross. Summers were worse. Austin and Vanessa would lounge on rental boats Dad financed, blasting country music across the bay, posting boomerangs of champagne clinks on social media. Grandpa's texts inviting them fishing went unread. I'd go instead. We'd sit in his small motorboat, lines cast into the water, comfortable silence wrapping around us. He'd show me how to feel the tension on the line, how to know when it was time to pull. Details matter, Linda, he'd say, eyes on the water. Miss them and everything falls apart. I thought he was talking about striped bass. Later, in the operating room, standing over a tiny patient's open chest, I realized he'd been talking about everything. Years after those fishing trips, standing in Mom's backyard with chowder drying on my skin, and my family watching me like I was a bomb about to go off, that sentence floated back to the surface of my mind. Details matter. My brother's debt, my sister's absence, my parents' choices, my grandfather's will. The folder on the table wasn't just paper, it was every detail he'd ever seen that they thought didn't count. And I was finally done pretending not to notice. Medical school wasn't just hard, it stripped you down to your bones and rebuilt you into something sharper, quicker, and a little less human with every passing year. But in that brutal process, I found clarity. The same clarity Grandpa had always nudged me toward. By the time I entered my residency in Boston, the pediatric oncology ward had become my second home. The place smelled of alcohol swabs, printer toner, and fear. The kind of fear you learn to inhale so it wouldn't choke you. Children shouldn't know words like neuroblastoma or sarcoma. Parents shouldn't have to memorize chemo schedules or platelet counts. But they did, and I stood between them and the unthinkable every single day. Dr. Harrison, nurses would call down the hallway, "Your patient is crashing." And I would run, always running, always showing up. Sleep was a rumor. Meals were energy bars and supply closets. My white coat pockets were stuffed with alcohol wipes, pagers, and pens that kept disappearing into the universe. But I thrived, not because it was easy, because it mattered. The night that changed everything began like any other. Fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and a stack of charts that reached my elbow. Then the emergency page came through. 6-year-old female, rare cardiac tumor, helicopter inbound from Vermont, vitals unstable. When they wheeled Sophie in, she was limp, her small chest rising shallowly under the helicopter blankets. Her stuffed elephant was tucked under her arm, one button eye missing. The attending glanced at me. "Your case, Harrison. You ready?" I didn't think. I moved. 11 hours in the OR. 11 hours praying the tumor wouldn't rupture, my hands wouldn't slip, the world wouldn't tilt the wrong way. Ethan scrubbed in halfway through, stepping beside me without speaking. We communicated with glances, breath, tiny nods. When Sophie opened her eyes the next morning and whispered, "Is my elephant okay?" I had to turn away for a second, because relief makes even surgeons human. Local news exploded the next day. Young doctor saves Vermont girl. The heart whisperer from Maine. Camera crews camped outside the children's hospital. Reporters asked me for quotes between rounds. Sophie's parents brought me an envelope with a crayon drawing of me holding hands with their daughter. In messy 6-year-old handwriting. "Thank you for fixing my heart, Sophie." The story spread. Fellowship offers followed. My name circulated in circles I had no time to appreciate. Meanwhile, back in Portland, the universe was staging a different kind of surgery, one that would cut deeper than anything inside an operating room. While I was learning to hold life in my hands, my brother was building an empire out of vapor and borrowed confidence. HealthSync. That was the name of Austin's big breakthrough, the AI-integrated wearable app that would revolutionize preventive medicine. Investors bought the pitch. Dad co-signed the first loan, then the second. Money flowed like a broken faucet. Austin rented a waterfront condo, leased a Tesla, posted motivational quotes about hustling and succeeding. Vanessa, 16 at the time, tagged along for photo ops, posing with mock prototypes like they were already saving lives. But code doesn't care about charisma, servers don't care about charm, and medicine does not care for shortcuts. The cracks appeared first as whispers, developers quitting, delays in beta testing, investors wanting revenue instead of promises. 3 competitors launched similar features at half the price. Austin doubled down, borrowing more, spending more, promising more. By the second year, the $1.8 million had evaporated. Condo, gone. Tesla, repossessed. Employees, gone. Investors, furious. Dad, quietly panicking. Vanessa, dropped to part-time classes to help with rent. Austin moved into a studio apartment above a Thai restaurant, oil smell seeping into his clothes. For the first time in our lives, he looked like a person who understood consequences. But understanding didn't mean accepting. 3 years before everything came crashing down, Grandpa's health worsened noticeably. Congestive heart failure tightened its grip. Hospital stays became routine. Oxygen tanks gathered like silent sentinels around his cottage. I coordinated his care between my own 90-hour weeks, calling cardiologists between surgeries, analyzing lab results during lunch breaks. adjusting his medication schedule from hospital lounges. Austin sent generic "get well soon" texts. Vanessa posted broken heart emojis on Facebook. My parents sent flowers with pre-written messages. I showed up. When he took his final breath early on a Tuesday morning, I was scrubbing out from surgery. I didn't make it in time. But I handled everything afterward. Funeral arrangements, legal paperwork, the 1,000 invisible tasks no one noticed. The funeral itself was small. Neighbors, a few colleagues from his early pharma days, a pharmacist who'd known him for decades. Austin arrived late, wearing wrinkled khakis and checking his phone between condolences. Vanessa scrolled through Instagram during the eulogy. Mom dabbed dry eyes with a tissue, and Dad recited a hollow speech about a life well lived. I stood next to Grandpa's framed photograph, feeling like my chest was being carved open without anesthesia. After the service, as people drifted toward their cars, a lawyer approached me. Tall, gray coat, eyes sharp. "Miss Harrison, your grandfather specified private delivery." He handed me a thick envelope, sealed and heavy in my palm. "For your eyes only." I didn't open it. Not then, not surrounded by people who had barely known the man they were pretending to grieve. It wasn't until I was back in my apartment overlooking the Charles River, Boston lights twinkling through the window, that I finally slit the envelope open. Inside were asset lists, company share certificates, trust details, a notarized letter, multiple sealed sections marked confidential, open only in the presence of the trustee. Every page repeated the same truth in different legal language. Grandpa left everything to me. Not because I was the oldest, not because I was a doctor, but because I showed up. My heart ached with grief and guilt and something else I didn't want to name: vindication. I placed the envelope inside my safe, locked it, and walked away. I told no one, not Ethan, not Natalie, not a single soul. But secrets are heavy. Carrying them changes the way you walk, breathe, answer the phone, smile at the world. Austin noticed first. 2 weeks after the funeral, he called me from an unknown number, probably a burner phone, since creditors were already circling. "So, did Grandpa mention anything? Maybe leave some paperwork?" His tone was sugary, strained. I lied. "No idea what you're talking about, Austin. I've been working double shifts." He didn't buy it. He just didn't know how deep the truth ran. Vanessa tried next. Mom emailed hints. Dad asked leading questions. I gave them nothing. But that silence, it built pressure, like a fault line ready to snap. The breaking point came a few months later, right after an exhausting 19-hour shift. I was barely conscious when my phone buzzed against my scrubs. Austin, of course. "Hey, Linda," he said brightly. "Mom's birthday next weekend. Big celebration. Everyone's coming. We're all so proud of you. You'll be there, right?" Vanessa jumped on the other line, voice dripping sweet enthusiasm. "Yes, you have to come. It wouldn't be the same without Boston's superstar." Their voices didn't match their intentions. I should have said no. Ethan had asked me that morning, "Why do you keep letting them treat you like this?" But exhaustion makes you easy to manipulate. Guilt makes you predictable. So I said, "I'll come." Later that night, while I was packing, my best friend Natalie texted, "Don't go. Your siblings are asking investors about estate lawyers. Feels like a setup." I stared at the message, feeling my stomach twist. But then another thought rose, quiet, cold, steady. "Let them try." Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind. "Remember who showed up." I zipped my bag, I grabbed the folder, and I drove toward the very storm they thought they were preparing to unleash. They didn't know I'd arrive holding the lightning. Driving to Portland always felt like slipping backward into a version of myself I'd outgrown, quiet, accommodating, the emotional shock absorber for everyone else's chaos. But this time, the air felt different, charged. I left Boston before dawn, thermos of coffee in the cup holder, the thick folder sealed inside my leather bag like a secret heartbeat. The sky was still bruised purple when I merged onto I-95. Ethan called just as I crossed into New Hampshire. "You sure about this?" he asked. His voice was warm, steady, the opposite of the storm waiting for me. "It's just a birthday party," I lied. He exhaled long enough that I could picture him rubbing his forehead the way he always did when he was trying not to push too hard. "Call me if anything feels wrong." I promised I would, but we both knew I wouldn't. As the miles slipped by, I replayed the past several months like a medical case study. After Grandpa's death, Austin's financial life metastasized faster than untreated cancer. HealthSync's collapse triggered breached contracts, lawsuits, collection calls, a 6-figure IRS flag, Dad's savings draining into the void. Austin defaulted on the $1.8 million loan. The Tesla vanished in the middle of the night. The condo went on the market, fast, selling at a loss big enough to make even Dad pale. He moved into a cramped studio above a Thai restaurant. Oily smoke seeped through the walls. Rent was always late. He'd go online occasionally to post inspirational quotes about bouncing back, but in real life, he was unraveling. Desperation makes people creative. Desperation and entitlement make them dangerous. Vanessa's unraveling was quieter, but just as sharp. Her tuition checks bounced. She dropped to part-time classes, then stopped going altogether. She moved in with Austin to save on expenses, picking up waitressing shifts at a tourist trap downtown and sending scraps of her tips home to help pay Mom and Dad's bills. Whenever she called me, which wasn't often, it was to vent about how hard adulting is, or how unfair it was that everything was suddenly so expensive. I'd listen, offer what emotional support I could, then hang up with a knot in my gut. She had no idea what the real world demanded. Mom and Dad had padded her entire life in bubble wrap. For the first time, the bubble was popping. I didn't want to feel sorry for them, not after everything. But when Mom's voice cracked on the phone one night as she admitted they'd cashed out part of their emergency fund to help Vanessa with car repairs, a small part of me ached. Dad's overtime shifts increased. Mom picked up tutoring outside of school hours. They were aging faster under the weight of two children who'd never learned to stand on their own feet. And that's when the questions started. Soft at first, harmless, then sharper. Did your grandfather say anything to you? Was there paperwork? Maybe something we should all see? I dodged each one with surgical precision. But secrets like mine don't stay silent forever. People can smell them. And Austin? He could practically taste it. When I bought his defaulted loan from the bank, the manager raised her eyebrows. "You're sure about this, Dr. Harrison?" I nodded. "It's complicated." It was more than complicated. It was strategic. As the holder of his promissory note, I controlled the foreclosure timeline. It meant I could keep creditors from tearing apart Grandpa's old holdings. It also meant Austin's financial fate was, legally, in my hands. A fact I kept locked inside my chest like a loaded gun. The trust document was worse, or better, depending on the angle. Clause 7B. The no contest clause. If any family member challenged the will, they would immediately forfeit all rights to any potential benefit and become liable for all opposing legal fees. Grandpa didn't just leave me everything. He built an electric fence around it. You could touch it, but you'd get burned clean through. The night before I left for Portland, Ethan came over with takeout and that furrowed look that made me want to both kiss him and run. "You're carrying something heavier than you're admitting," he said gently, setting pad thai on my kitchen counter. I shrugged, pouring wine. "I'm just tired." He gave me a look that said he didn't believe a single syllable, but he let it drop, for the moment. I should have told him everything, but every time I tried, the words felt sharp, like they would puncture the fragile peace I'd built around myself. Then Maya Turner, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, entered the picture again. Not romantically, professionally, which was somehow worse. She worked with a marketing group tied to some of Austin's old investors and had caught wind of inheritance whispers. She'd approached Ethan during a conference mixer. "So, Linda's grandfather left something big, right?" Her tone had been too casual, too curious. Ethan shut her down, but he told me afterward. "If Maya knows, other people know. Be careful." It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. Halfway to Portland, I stopped at a rest area, the kind with fluorescent lighting and a vending machine humming like it had a secret life. My best friend Natalie, ER nurse, human lie detector, and the only person I trusted to call me out without softening the blow, sent a message. "Don't go. I heard your siblings are digging around about probate lawyers. Feels like they're planning something." I read it 3 times. My pulse throbbed in my jaw. Then another ping. "Trust your gut, Lynn. They only call when they want something." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I put the car back in drive. This time, I wasn't walking into their plan. I was carrying my own. When I reached the city limits, the sun was dipping low over the water, setting the skyline gold. I drove past the old fishing docks, past the turnoff for Grandpa's cottage, past memories that twisted something deep in my ribs. When I finally turned down my parents' street, cars were parked along both curbs. Too many, far more than Mom usually invited. Every instinct I had, the instincts that kept children alive, lit up with a quiet, cold warning. This wasn't a birthday party. This was a stage, a setup, a spectacle, and they were expecting me to walk into it unarmed. But they didn't know I'd brought the one thing they never believed I'd have: power. Real, legal, uncontestable power. I parked behind a stranger's SUV, cut the engine, and gripped the steering wheel. Okay, Grandpa, I whispered. Let's finish what you started. The house glowed with warm lights and laughter. But underneath, I smelled something else. Desperation. And desperation always makes people careless. I lifted my bag onto my shoulder, walked to the front door, and stepped into the lion's den. The moment the front door opened, the house swallowed me whole. Warm light poured out from the hallway. Laughter, voices overlapping, music humming from a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen, Mom's apron dusted with flour, Dad's beer bottle sweating onto a coaster. It was all painfully familiar, except for the way everyone froze for half a second when they saw me, then immediately pretended they hadn't. Austin appeared first, wearing a polo shirt so crisp it still had the folding seams. His smile stretched too wide, like a rubber band about to snap. There she is, he boomed, pulling me into a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long. Our superstar doctor. His cologne was sharp, so was the tension beneath it. Vanessa bounced down the hallway next, phone already in hand. Linda, smile! The flash popped before I could react. She posted the photo instantly, probably before she even looked at it. Gotta capture the moment, she chirped. Capture. Interesting word choice. Mom stepped forward then, beaming like nothing had ever fractured between us. Linda, honey, you came! Her hands were warm as she grasped mine. Her voice was too bright, an actress trying to hit all the right notes. I reached into my bag and handed her a small ivory box wrapped in silk ribbon. A birthday present, I said softly. She opened it, eyes widening. The compass charm bracelet glinted under the dining room lights. Delicate, understated, beautiful. I'd chosen it because it symbolized something I knew Mom had lost along the way. Direction. Oh, Linda, she whispered, sliding it onto her wrist. It's perfect. Dad raised his beer in a half-hearted salute from the recliner. Good to see you, kiddo, he said without standing. Guests milled around. Neighbors from the old cul-de-sac. Dad's engineering buddies. Mom's teacher friends. A handful of unfamiliar faces. Austin's former investors, from the looks of their Patagonia vests. Too many people, too many eyes. My pulse flattened into something cold and steady, the same feeling I got before cutting into a patient's chest. Calm before controlled chaos. Vanessa tugged me toward the backyard. Come on, the party's outside. String lights crisscrossed above picnic tables draped in red checkered cloths. A grill smoked near the deck, filling the air with the buttery scent of lobster rolls. Kids darted around with sparklers. Adults clustered near coolers full of beer and iced tea. It should have been festive. It should have been harmless. But it felt staged. Everywhere I went, someone stopped me to talk. Oh, you're the doctor who saved that little girl. When's your next big surgery? Boston must be amazing. Still single, right? Austin hovered nearby, smiling too hard, steering me toward different groups like a host showing off a prized exotic bird. This is my sister, he'd announce, the pediatric oncologist. Scattered applause, raised eyebrows, prying questions. He loved it. He loved the reflected glow. But he also loved something else, watching me play the quiet, polite version of myself while he held all the attention. Near the grill, Dad introduced me to a colleague. This one's the brains of the family, he said. Austin's the business mind, of course. Of course, of course. Vanessa floated toward her sorority friends, showing them travel brochures for London. I got into a study abroad program, she announced loudly. Business classes in the UK. Everyone clapped. Mom beamed. Scholarship? Loan? Who was paying? No one seemed to wonder, or care. The universe had always conspired to give Vanessa soft landings. Everywhere I walked, murmurs followed me. She's the famous one. She'll probably buy a mansion soon. I heard her salary is insane. Austin said the inheritance skipped her, though. Yeah, she didn't visit the grandfather much, right? That last one almost made me laugh. But instead, I let my face go smooth. Blank. Surgeon mode. I had just set my paper plate down. Coleslaw, grilled corn, half a lobster roll, when I heard whispered voices by the garden hedge. Austin, Vanessa. I didn't move, didn't turn, just listened. Austin's voice was low but urgent. Just keep her distracted. She's not supposed to interfere. Vanessa nodded, her sundress swaying slightly as she shifted her weight. Mom says she'll give a speech after dessert, she whispered. That's when we'll do it. Do what? Austin muttered. Just make sure she doesn't leave. We need her here. Vanessa chewed her lip. What if she, I don't know, fights back? Austin snorted. She won't. She never does. Something icy slid into my bloodstream, a familiar clarity. the clarity of diagnosis. They weren't just planning to embarrass me, they were planning to ambush me, publicly. And the terrifying part wasn't that they believed they could hurt me. The terrifying part was that they believed I would take it. My aunt approached then, Rachel, the one always half a glass of wine away from spilling secrets. Your siblings are on fire tonight, she said, fanning herself dramatically. Austin's comeback story, Vanessa's London adventure, everyone's talking about it. She leaned closer. So tell me, did Grandpa really leave something for the family? Austin said there's a trust. I stared her dead in the eyes. Did he? Her cheeks pinked. She drifted away. As the sun dipped below the bay, Dad called for attention. Toasts, he shouted. Everyone gather around. Glasses clinked. People shuffled. Mom dabbed at the corner of her eyes, already emotional. Vanessa fluffed her hair. Austin adjusted his collar. They were ready for whatever performance they had rehearsed. Music faded. Conversations hushed. The last of the sunlight disappeared. Stage lights, string lights glowed overhead. Austin stepped forward, holding something. No, not something. A tureen. The heavy ceramic bowl Mom used only on special occasions. And suddenly, before I could process the shape of what was coming, Austin's voice rang out, loud and theatrical. Before dessert, we have a family announcement. All eyes turned toward him. Vanessa giggled, covering her mouth. Mom looked down at her bracelet, my bracelet, as if bracing herself. Dad stood stiff as a mast. Austin spread his arms, bowl tilting dangerously. It turns out Grandpa Walter left an inheritance, he cried. Shares in his old company. Trust money, enough for the whole family. A ripple of excitement, gasps, cheers. And then Austin turned toward me. Everyone except Linda. The bowl tipped. Chowder surged. I blinked once, and everything went white hot. The chowder hit before the gasp finished leaving anyone's throat. Scalding, heavy, relentless. It slammed against my face, streamed down my scalp, soaked into the collar of my dress. Hot broth slid along my spine. Chunks of potato clung to my skin. The smell, clam, cream, onion, wrapped around me like humiliation made tangible. For a split second, the world went soundless. Then the noise flooded back in. A chorus of shocked inhales, someone yelling, "Oh my God!" The scrape of a chair hitting the patio. Austin's voice cut through it all. You have 15 minutes to get out of this family. He slammed the empty tureen down. Ceramic cracked. The sound echoed, sharp, final. Vanessa put a hand to her mouth in faux horror, but her eyes sparkled with triumph. Just accept it, Linda, she said sweetly. You were never part of this. Dad stared at the ground. Mom stared at me, horrified, but rooted to her spot. Not one person moved to hand me a towel. Not one person stepped between me and the siblings dripping with glee. There are moments that split your life into before and after. This was mine. I reached up, wiped chowder from my eyelashes, and felt something inside me click into place. Not anger, not devastation. Precision. The same precision I held in the operating room when a child's life rested on the steadiness of my hands. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for my leather bag. The yard had gone silent, the kind of silence that precedes either salvation or destruction. I pulled out the manila folder, thick, heavy, swollen with truths they were about to choke on. I set it on the table. The thud sounded like a gavel. 15 minutes, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. All right. I flipped the cover open. Vanessa's confident smile flickered. Austin's jaw tensed. Mom whispered, Linda, maybe we should talk privately. I didn't look at her. Public humiliation, I said, deserves public correction. I pulled out the notarized will, held it up so everyone could see the signatures. The legal seals, the date. According to the will of Walter Harrison, I began, my voice carrying across the yard like a scalpel slicing open old wounds, all of his pharmaceutical company shares, valued at $4.2 million, and the trust fund of $2.1 million are left solely to... I paused. My eyes locked with Austin's. Dr. Linda Harrison. The silence collapsed into murmurs. She got everything? That can't be right. No. Austin said, oh my God. Mom clutched her chest. Dad blinked, stunned. Vanessa's mouth dropped open like a hinge had broken. Austin barked, liar! I held the document out toward a cousin standing nearby. See for yourself, 3 witness signatures. County seal, dated 8 months before Grandpa passed. Phones came out. Cameras zoomed. Screenshots lit up faces. A cousin reading the will whispered, holy crap, it's legit. Guests shifted away from Austin and Vanessa without meaning to, instinctively distancing themselves from sinking ships. Vanessa sputtered, "Grandpa wouldn't cut us out like that." I turned a page. "He did." I pointed to the clause. "Explicitly excluded are those family members who showed persistent indifference during his lifetime." A neighbor murmured, "That's exactly what he told me years ago, that only one grandchild visited him." Mom's face twisted. Guilt, grief, and the abrupt realization of her own complicity. Dad swallowed hard. "Walter never told me." "For the same reason I didn't," I replied, my tone flat. "Because you only showed up when it was convenient." Austin lunged forward. "We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. You're stealing—" I raised a hand. "Read Clause 7B. He froze. I slid the page across the table. "This trust includes a no contest clause. If anyone tries to sue or challenge the will, they forfeit their share." "But we don't have a share," Vanessa whispered. "Exactly." I continued, "and you become liable for my legal fees." Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, "That's ironclad." Austin's face went crimson. His breathing hitched. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. I reached into the folder again. "This," I said, laying down the first packet, "is the IRS audit report addressed to Austin Harrison. It includes $750,000 in marketing expenses with 0 supporting invoices and $520,000 in equipment leases for items never delivered." Austin staggered back. No, they can't." "They already did," I said. "Your bankruptcy attorney forwarded it to me." Another packet. "This is the updated trust clause, notarized 2 months after Grandpa's birthday. The one both of you skipped for a Vegas trip." Another sharp ripple through the crowd. Then the final packet. "And this," I said, placing it gently on the table like a final nail in a coffin, "is the promissory note for your $1.8 million loan from Coastal Community Bank." Austin's head snapped up. "What?" "It's in my name now," I said. "I bought your defaulted debt when the bank put it up for bid." Vanessa choked on a breath. You bought his what?" "Your brother's debt," I repeated, "to protect Grandpa's legacy from being torn apart by creditors." I flipped the page. "And unfortunately for you, there's a cross-collateral clause. The condo, the car, everything tied to Austin's signature, already foreclosed." "No!" Austin roared. He lunged across the table. That's when the officers appeared. 2 uniformed cops stepped through the open garden gate. The sergeant lifted a hand. "Welfare check. We received a call about threats and an assault." I raised my chowder-soaked hand slightly. "That would be me," I said calmly. The sergeant scanned me, my hair still dripping, my dress ruined, then looked at Austin. "So, she's the one covered in soup and you're the one screaming?" Austin sputtered. She's ruining our lives." The sergeant nodded slowly. "Uh-huh." He looked at me. "Do you want to press charges for the soup incident?" Vanessa stepped forward, shrill. "We're going to be homeless. Don't you understand? She can't do this." "She isn't doing anything," the sergeant said. "Natural consequences are doing this." Austin kicked a chair so hard it cracked. The sergeant reached for his belt. "Last warning, son." Austin froze, chest heaving. Mom was crying now. Quietly, brokenly. Dad looked 20 years older. Guests were slipping away like ghosts, stepping around puddles of chowder, pretending not to look back. I closed the folder, locked everything inside, lifted my bag. "All of this," I said, "was preventable if you had shown up for Grandpa, if you had shown up for anyone but yourselves." I stepped back from the table, broth still dripping from my hair. "You asked me to leave your family in 15 minutes, I said softly, "and you were right." I turned toward the gate. "But tonight, the family that's ending is yours." And with that, I walked past the officers, past the stunned crowd, past the collapsing illusion of the Harrisons, and out of the family I had been leaving, piece by piece, for years. People assume that the most violent moments leave the deepest scars. They're wrong. Sometimes it's the quiet after the explosion, the settling silence, the empty hallway, the absence of footsteps that does the real damage. The night I drove away from my parents' house, chowder crusting on my skin and smoke from the grill still clinging to my hair, the sky above the bay was clear. Hundreds of stars, indifferent, steady. I pulled onto I-95 and didn't look back. News traveled fast through towns like Portland. Faster than truth. Faster than dignity. Austin's fall wasn't a crash, it was an unraveling. The foreclosure notice was taped to his apartment door, red stamp, glaring under flickering fluorescent hallway lights. His neighbors filmed it. Someone posted it in a community Facebook group. Someone else screenshotted the IRS lien. The condo sold for pennies on the dollar. The Tesla he once flaunted on social media was long gone. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy refiled. Most debts discharged. Except the IRS one. That one stuck to him like a shadow. He rented a studio above a laundromat after that. The walls were thin. The washer vibrations constant. The smell of detergent overwhelming. People stopped asking him about HealthSync. People stopped asking him anything. Vanessa dropped out mid-semester. Tuition unpaid. Credits frozen. Her London dreams evaporated like steam on cold glass. She took a job at a downtown Portland coffee chain. Not the cute, aesthetic kind. The high-volume, low-pay corporate one where tourists order complicated drinks and teenagers ask for extra caramel without tipping. Her apron was perpetually stained with espresso, her voice hoarse from calling out mobile orders. She forced smiles through bone-deep exhaustion. Posted less on Instagram. And when she did post, it was filtered within an inch of reality. No one in the family commented on it. No one liked it. 2 months after I walked away, I received a letter. Handwritten, scented with Mom's old perfume, folded neatly, the way she used to pack Vanessa's lunches. Inside were 3 pages of apologies. We were blind. We failed you. We should have protected you. We should have shown up. Please forgive us. Please come home. I read it once while sitting cross-legged in front of my fireplace. The light flickered across the words, softening nothing. I fed the pages into the flames, watched the edges curl, darken, disappear. I never responded. The pharmaceutical shares transferred smoothly, just numbers and accounts, signatures on forms, access codes and passwords replacing grief and memory. The trust fund liquidated within 60 days. Clean, precise. I accepted the board seat at Grandpa's old company, a position he had held decades ago, now circled back to me. I funded expansions in pediatric cardiac research, built a grant in Sophie's name, the little girl whose heart I stitched back together. And then I created something Grandpa would have loved most: full tuition, room and board for low-income Maine students pursuing pre-med. The first recipients were 2 kids from coastal towns. No connections, no privilege, just grit in their essays and hunger in their eyes. One wanted to become a rural family doctor, the other wanted pediatric surgery. Both reminded me of myself. Both reminded me of Grandpa. For a while, Ethan didn't understand my silence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he'd asked one night as we walked along the Charles River, our breath white in the winter air. "Because it wasn't your burden," I said. He stopped walking. "Linda, that's not what partnership means." His tone wasn't angry, it was sad. We talked, really talked, about secrecy, about protection, about fear. He admitted something too. "Maya tried to stir things," he said. "Asked questions. Tried to imply you were hiding something. I shut her down, but she was circling." I met his gaze. "I know you're not him," I whispered, "but I needed to handle my family myself." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "And now?" "Now," I said, "I'm not hiding." He smiled, not triumphant, just relieved. We walked home together. No fireworks, no dramatic reconciliation. Just 2 people choosing honesty over fear. A luxury I had never had with my family. 3 months after the birthday ambush, I stopped for gas in Portsmouth. Pump 4. When I looked up, I saw Austin at pump 6. Unshaven, slumped shoulders, rust bucket Honda, cheap gas. He froze when he saw me. Rage and shame warred across his face. I nodded once, neutral, nothing more. He looked away first. A month later, at Portland International Jetport, a barista handed me my order. Triple shot Americano for Linda? I took the cup. The barista was Vanessa. Her name tag gleamed. She didn't recognize me. Not really. Or maybe she did, but pretended not to. I paid cash, left no tip, walked toward my gate without looking back. Around Christmas, a final holiday card arrived from my parents. The envelope was gold, the handwriting careful, the message inside earnest. I returned it to sender, unopened, red ink across the front. They didn't try again. In the quiet of my apartment, after late-night shifts, after reviewing scholarship applications, after walking home with Ethan through lamplit streets, I sometimes hear Grandpa's voice. "Details matter, Lynn. Miss them and everything falls apart." I used to think he meant medicine. Now I understand he meant life. Because legacy isn't money. It isn't shares. It isn't trust funds or legal clauses or public confrontations under string lights. It's the choice to break the cycle, to build something better, to walk away from people who use family as a weapon, to choose respect over blood, to choose peace over obligation. And to remember always, the greatest inheritance isn't what you receive, it's what you refuse to carry forward.